everyone, my name's Amanda. I'm the manager of public programs at the Schuylkill Center. So thanks for joining me for this week's Ask-A-Naturalist program. I know you're probably used to seeing Rebecca here. She does a lot of the Ask-A-Naturalist programs, but she's taking some time off this week, so I'm going to be here with you all this week. So happy to be filling in. So I'm going to wait another minute or two to get everyone signed on, and then once we have everyone, we'll get started. So as you're coming on, I'd love to know where everyone's tuning in from and how you heard about the program. So as we're waiting for people to sign on, if you just want to type a comment, let me know where you're tuning in from and how you heard about the program. That'd be great. And again, my name's Amanda, and I'm going to be filling in for Rebecca this week. We'll give another few minutes before we get started. So this week we're going to be talking about things that you can find when you go down to the shore in the summer. So things that you can find walking along the beach. So again, we'll just give it a few more minutes, wait till some more people sign on. But for those of you that are signing on, if you could just drop me a comment, let me know where you're tuning in from, how you heard about the Ask-A-Naturalist program, that'd be great. And then we'll get started in a few minutes. So as we're waiting for a few more people to sign on, feel free to start brainstorming some questions that you have. Again, this week we're going to be talking about things that we can find along the shore. So when you're beachcombing, when you're down in Ocean City or Sea Isle or wherever you go, things that you might find when you're walking along the beach. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. So again, my name's Amanda. I'm filling in for Rebecca this week on Ask-A-Naturalist. And for those of you who are just tuning in, just wanted to let you know that our topic this week is going to be things that we can find along the beach. So things that you can find when you're walking along the shoreline, cool shells, maybe even some jellies, some egg cases, and things like that. So I had a few questions submitted, so I'm going to start off by talking about those questions and trying to answer those. But we'll keep this pretty open, so along the way, if you have any questions as I'm talking about things, feel free to just type them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. If I can't get you an answer now, I'll make sure to get back to you. But again, we're going to be talking today about things that we can find at the beach. Cool. All right, so again, I had 2 or 3 questions posed to me that I'm going to start with. So the first question that I had that I thought was a really great one, it's something that I've always wondered myself, is why do we find holes in shells at the beach? These perfect holes, usually at the very top of the shell. I have a little picture to show you what they usually look like. So I thought that that was a really great question to start with, because this is something that I always wondered myself, because you see them on so many seashells down at the shore. And I know when I was younger, and maybe some of you did this as well, I would always collect those seashells and use them to make necklaces. And I kind of always just assumed that that's what the holes were for, never really thought too much about it. But when I started in environmental education, I learned the answer to why these shells have holes in the top, and it's actually really cool. So those holes are made by a critter called a moon snail. So a moon snail looks something like this, and you may have seen it at the beach before. If not, now that I've pointed it out, I'm sure you'll see it, because they're pretty common down at the shore. But this tiny little creature is what makes those holes at the top of shells. So what it does is it has a little tongue, it's called a radula, and what it does is that tongue has a bunch of spikes on the side. So it'll literally take its tongue and like drill it into the top of a shell and just keep twisting, kind of like a corkscrew. So just keep twisting, twisting, drill more, drill more. It's kind of a pretty time-consuming process, but it'll keep drilling its tongue through, and then once it gets its tongue all the way through, it'll just suck out whatever is inside. So usually the things that it's eating are clams a lot of times. So this clam's pretty big. It might not eat a clam this large, but a lot of clams that are smaller in size, you'll see that they have that perfect hole at the top, which was, again, drilled by the moon snail. So I'm not sure if any of you have seen the moon snail at the beach before. I know I see them a lot. This one's like a medium-sized shell, I'd say. They can also get to be a lot bigger than this as well. But yeah, that's the culprit. That's the animal that's making those holes in the top of all of the shells that we see at the shore. So in some other places, not New Jersey, there might be some other animals that also can make those holes, but along our coast it's mostly just this moon snail that's going in and making all of those holes, which is kind of cool. And I thought that that was a really great question to start, because I think that that's something that a lot of people have wondered. Why are there all these holes in all of these shells, perfect holes at the very top of the shells all along the shore? So I thought that was a really great question to start. Something else that I just want to point out, though, since we were talking about the holes in the shells and the moon snail, another thing that you might find related to the moon snail along the shore is its egg case. So its egg case is sometimes called a sand collar. Let's see, I have a picture of it here. Looks something like this. And if you have seen the sand collar at the shore before, if you could just drop a comment or give a thumbs up, because I think that is something that's maybe not as common to see as the moon snail shell itself, but if you look for it, it's pretty easy to find all along the shoreline. But yeah, that moon snail will make a sand collar. That's its egg case. And then I have just a little fragment from that egg case, and you can kind of see all the little eggs that are on it there. So it kind of lets out like this big long line of mucus. That mucus picks up all of the sand that sticks to it, and then the eggs are then laid on top of the sand. It's kind of cool. And you can see just how many there are just in that like one tiny little section here. So you can imagine if we had that whole collar, there's thousands upon thousands of little tiny moon snail eggs. Great, so thanks for that question. That was, again, a really great one to start with, talking about the moon snail, how we get the holes in the top of shells. Again, just wanted to open it up. If you have any questions along the way, feel free, things that you've always wondered as you're walking along the shore, what is this, where did this come from? Feel free to just type it in the comments. Nice, so again, that's the moon snail, and that's the shell that's responsible for making all of the tiny holes in the top of clam shells that we see along the shoreline. And if you've seen them, I know I asked about the egg case, but if you've seen the moon snail at the shore before, can you just give me a thumbs up? I know they're pretty common. Yeah, so thanks so much for that question. Another one that I got was also asking about, what is, again, another type of egg case that we see along the shoreline. Let's pull it out here. So someone was asking about what this is. And I'd like to open this up to all of you. Does anyone know what this is here? So I kind of gave it away that it's an egg case, but does anyone know what type of animal lays this egg case? And I'll give it a minute or so because the comments are a little delayed on my end. But if you do know what type of animal this is from, you can just type it into the comments below. And this is usually found at the high tide line. So like way at the top of the beach, and usually it's really easy to overlook. It just kind of blends in with the seaweed, with the dead plant matter that's there, and it kind of just, it almost looks like a plant itself. Hi Mamta! Thanks for tuning in. So I'll give it a few more seconds if anyone has a guess as to what animal this egg case comes from. Again, it's a little delayed on my end, so I'll just wait a little longer, and then we'll get to the answer. But again, this is one of those things that you might have never seen it at the shore before, but now that I pointed out, I guarantee you that you'll see it down there all the time now. Alright, so I'm going to give away the answer. So this is the egg case of a whelk. So a whelk looks like this. A lot of people call these conch shells. So a little different than conchs. Conch shells are usually found in more tropical waters. Here, actually, I have a better one here. There we go. So conchs are usually found in more tropical waters. Whelks, though, they live around us. We won't find conch shells around us, just whelks, because we don't have tropical waters here. Also, another difference between the two is that the whelks, the one that I have here, they're carnivorous, whereas conch shells are herbivores. So kind of cool. So again, this little creature is what lays this really big, long egg case. So it's a whelk. This is a particular type of whelk called a knobbed whelk. So if you look at the top of it, you can kind of see how it gets its name. It's got those little knobs there. But there's two other types of whelks that we have along the New Jersey shoreline. There's one called a lightning whelk, which looks very similar to this, but instead of opening on this side, it'll open on the other side. And then there's a whelk called a channeled whelk, which is just really smooth at the top instead of having all of these spikes. But again, that whelk will lay this big, long egg case. And something that's really cool about this egg case is that there's actually like tiny little capsules. I don't know if you can see that, but each one of these capsules has about 100 tiny baby whelks in it. And there can be anywhere from 40 capsules to like over 150. So you can see it. So you can imagine just how many whelks are in here. If inside each little one of these, there's 100. So probably thousands, if not more, in this whole thing. And this is actually a whelk case from a channeled whelk. So you can kind of see, but it's kind of pushed, like pinched almost at the top. I have another whelk egg case, and both of these can be easily found along the shore. This one's from a knobbed whelk. You can kind of see how it's like a little flatter at the top here. So again, the knobbed whelk was the one that I held up earlier. So this would be what its egg case looks like. This is from a type of whelk called a channeled whelk. But regardless of what type of whelk it comes from, there's, again, about 100 baby whelks inside each of these egg cases, which is kind of crazy. And then also on each egg case, there's a tiny hole. So let me see if I can find a good one to show you. There we go. So you can see those tiny holes at the top. So that's how the whelks will climb out. So it'll make a little hole, and then the 100 or so whelks that are in that little capsule will come out. So I'll try to bring it a little closer. I don't know if you can see any better, those holes at the top. But again, these are usually found along the high tide line, and I bet now that I mentioned it, you'll see them all the time. Usually they're anchored into the sand, like at the very bottom of the ocean, but when we have really turbulent waves or bad weather, they sometimes get uprooted, and then we'll find them at the high tide line. But one other thing that I want to show you is I want to show you what the tiny whelks that are inside each of these capsules look like, because that's the coolest part, I think, because they actually look just like the big whelk, just super small. So I'm going to get a magnifying glass so that we can see that a little better. But as I'm setting up the magnifying glass, if you have any questions about whelks or really just anything that you can find along the shoreline, feel free to type it into the comments. Again, I'm going over the few questions that I received prior, but I'd love to answer any questions that you might have along the way. All right. Okay, I'm going to grab my microscope here. Alright, so again, we're looking at what the baby whelks that are inside each of these egg sacs here look like. So I have my microscope set up. I'm just going to switch the camera around. Okay. There you go. So you can kind of see those tiny, tiny little baby whelks. And you'll see that they even open up to one side, just like the larger whelk does. So usually when we find these up at the high tide line, they're not alive anymore. They're dried out. And just like a lot of animals that produce a lot of offspring, not all of them survive. And that's fine. That's kind of why they produce that many offspring, because they know not all of them are going to survive. But again, these are the tiny, tiny whelk shells. Here, I'll see if I can turn one around a little better so we can see it up close. They're so little, they're slipping on my hand. I don't know if you can see like that little spiral, just like the adult shell, which is really cool. And again, there's probably about 100 of those inside each capsule, and then there's anywhere from 40 to like 150 capsules in that whole string. Okay, I'm just gonna switch my camera back around. Cool. Nice. So again, that was an egg case from a whelk. And this was what our whelk looked like. Alright, so I just had one last question that was submitted to me, but I, again, love to answer any questions that you have, so feel free to type them as I'm answering this last question that was submitted. Cool. And the last question that was submitted was about mermaids' purses, which looks like this. So has anyone seen one of these along the shoreline before? This one actually has some eggs on it from maybe like an oyster drill perhaps, but usually they don't have those. Usually they'll just be black on both sides. But love to know if anyone has seen these before at the shore. I know this time of year I'm finding a lot of them. I went to the beach the other day and probably found about 10 mermaids purses. But it all kind of depends on the time of year because again they are egg cases as well. And love to get any guesses as to what type of egg case you think this might belong to, what type of animal. And I'll give it a few seconds because again it's kind of delayed on my end. But if you have any guess as to what type of animal these egg cases are from, love to hear your guess. Yeah, this one's a little larger, have some smaller ones here. Right, so mermaids' purses are from, so they can actually be from a bunch of different animals. The ones that we find along the Jersey Shore, they're likely from skates. So skates, you might have heard of skates before, but they're very similar to stingrays, except they don't have stingers like stingrays do. And they also tend to be a little smaller. But for the most part, they look very similar to stingrays. But unlike stingrays, they lay their young in egg cases, whereas stingrays just have live young, so they don't have egg cases or anything. So most of the, these are again called mermaids' purses. Most of the mermaids' purses that we find along the Jersey Shore are from skates, although in other places there are some smaller shark species that can lay mermaids' purses as well. Oh, horseshoe crabs, that is a great guess. Horseshoe crabs will actually just lay their eggs right into the sand, but that is a really great guess. Those are one of my favorite creatures at the shore, and it would make them even that much cooler if they had egg cases like this, I think. But again, these egg cases are from skates, sometimes from sharks, though on the New Jersey coast it's likely again just from skates that we're seeing these from. But a really cool thing about these egg cases is sometimes you can actually see the young inside. So mine are all dried up, they don't have anything living inside. But if you found one and it was right along the where the water meets the sand, you might be able to dip it into the water and still see the skate swimming inside, which is kind of cool. If you find them farther up on the beach though, they're likely all dried out and the baby skate has already escaped. But if you find it closer to the shore, you might see a little baby swimming inside. You just have to kind of wet the egg case and then hold it up to some light to be able to tell. But mine, again, were found kind of at the high tide line, so there's nothing left swimming inside. But a lot of times, it's a little hard to find it. You can actually find the hole that they exit it from as well, and it's usually on one end. So they have the little hole that they exit from, the baby skate will live inside, and then any guesses as to what these kind of long tendrils coming off the sides might be for? I'll give it a few seconds. But they all have these 4 tendrils, and they are kind of spiky too. So any guess what they might be used for? So what the skates will actually do is they'll stick, when they lay their egg cases, they'll stick one end into the sand to bury, so that the egg case kind of stays buried and stays in one place while the baby inside develops. But once that baby leaves, a lot of times the egg case is really light, so when the waves and wind hit it, it can oftentimes get carried onto the shore. So again, this is something that you might have not noticed at the beach before, but if you're up at the high tide line and if you look through all of like the collection of plants and algae and things like that, chances are you might see a few of these mermaid purses. This especially is a really great time of year to find them at the beach. Like I said, I went to Corson's Inlet, which is a state park in New Jersey, the other weekend, and found, Crystal, yep, that is why they have the long tendrils to cling to plants and the seafloor itself. But yeah, I went to Corson's Inlet, which is a state park in New Jersey, and found about 10 of these the other day. They were everywhere. So it just kind of depends on the time of year that you go out, that you're at the shore, because if it's, during the middle of mating season like it is now, you're probably likely to find a lot of these. So again, they're from skates, but they can be from sharks too, just likely not in New Jersey, but if you're along another beach, maybe farther down south, you might be more likely to find some that are from sharks, which is even cooler. Cool. And so those are the 3 questions that I had posed to me today. Someone was curious what these here are, and again, they're skate egg cases. Another question about what this kind of crazy looking thing here is, and again, we said that was a whelk egg case. So this creature here. And then there's another question about what made the holes in the top of the shells that we see along the beach. So holes that look something like that. And again, we said that that was this guy here, the moon snail. So again, love to open it up to you if you have any other questions about things that you've seen on the beach recently, or about anything that we talked about. We have a few minutes left, so I'd love to answer any questions that you have. And again, it is a little delayed on my end, so I'll just give it some time. If you do have any questions, feel free to type them into the comments. And I do have a few other finds here if we don't have any questions that I can bring out. Also just curious, what are some of the beaches that you all head to this summer? I know I go to Ocean City a lot, but I know everyone kind of has like their own beach, whether it's Sea Isle, Wildwood, Ocean City, that they tend to go to. I just have one other moon snail here, so you can kind of see the barnacles on this one at the top. So these barnacles aren't alive, but if they were, you would see almost like a little mouth in the center that opens and closes and takes in things from the water. Mostly plankton is what they're taking in. Just some other finds that I'll just quickly show. So we have oyster here, really common to find along the shore, also really tasty. Another one that's pretty common is the slipper shell. So you can kind of see how it gets its name. It has like that little, it looks almost like a slipper on the back that you can like stick a really tiny foot into, but that's a slipper shell. They're also often found in like big clusters, one on top of one another. Oh, Rehoboth. Yeah, I haven't been down to Rehoboth in a long time, but I love it down there. Some other things you might find, I know scallops are really common. It's really hard to get one of these, like a whole one. They break so easily. But another common beach find. Let's see. Oh, here we go. We have a little clamshell that has that hole that we were talking about by the moon, from the moon snail. Let's see. Dingle shells are another really common one. They come in all different shapes and sizes and colors. They get their name because if you have a bunch of them in your hand and kind of shake them up, it's a nice jingle sound. So again, just pulling out some other beach finds that I found down in Ocean City, but if you had any questions about things that you found, feel free to type it into the comments. So I think that's most of what, this is a really common one, but this is a surf clam. So this is the largest type of clam that we'll find in Jersey. There's another clam that looks very similar. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, here we go. The quahog clam. You can tell it's a little different though if you look at the top. The quahog clam kind of like goes towards one end, whereas the surf clam just kind of like comes up to one point. And also the quahog clam usually has like a purple-ish tint on the inside. This one doesn't for some reason, but usually they're like a little purple at the end too, or at the bottom. Great. So thanks so much for joining me for Ask-A-Naturalist this week. Again, we have about 2 more minutes to close it out, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. But I love all the questions that were posed today. So talking about the holes in clams made by moon snails, what these are. So again, these are the whelk, so whelk shell, whelk egg casing. And then the last question that was asked was about this here, which is, again, a mermaid's purse, which comes from a skate. So it's an egg case for a skate, which is very similar to a stingray, just a little smaller and not able to sting like a stingray does. And also has an egg case, whereas a stingray does not. Alright, so since it doesn't look like there's any other questions, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me for Ask-A-Naturalist this week. I hope to see you all again next week when we dive into a different topic. But thanks again for joining me. Bye.